ATF Hit Team by Dan Mason. Chapter 1. A Quiet Night. James Reynolds, a small business owner in rural America, lived a life like many others. "I'm just trying to provide for my family," he often said to neighbors. His community respected him as a man who stayed out of trouble and worked hard. But this peaceful existence was shattered by what would later be called a tragic administrative mistake. In recent years, no-knock warrants had become a routine tool in law enforcement's war on drugs and firearms. James, having no record of illegal activity, never thought he would be a target. But like Breonna Taylor, whose death in a no-knock raid shocked the nation, James's family would soon face the same horrors. Chapter 2. A Knock in the Dark. Without warning, at 3:45 a.m., armed agents of the ATF stormed James's home. The battering ram splintered the door within seconds, sending James and his wife Laura into a panic. Thinking it was a robbery, James grabbed the legally owned shotgun from his nightstand. "Get down! Don't move!" echoed through the house, but in the darkness, confusion ruled. A single shot rang out, followed by several more. When the dust settled, James lay bleeding on the floor. The agents had come for suspected illegal weapons. None were found. The ATF's report would later claim the suspect presented an imminent threat, even though the family insisted they were never told who was breaking into their home. Like many no-knock raids gone wrong, there was no body cam footage, no way to verify what truly happened that night. Chapter 3. No Accountability. In the days that followed, Laura pleaded for answers. "They killed my husband for nothing," she told reporters. The ATF stonewalled her, refusing to release information, citing ongoing investigations. As with other controversial raids, such as the case of Anwar al-Awlaki's son killed in a drone strike with no official recording of the event, the Reynolds family was left with only the government's word. Laura soon realized that accountability was a distant dream. The ATF insisted that the raid was justified based on anonymous tips, despite no evidence ever being produced. "This is bigger than just one family," said an activist. "It's about the unchecked power of the state." Chapter 4. The Legal Trap. When Laura sought justice, she found herself trapped by the legal system. The courts ruled that the agents were protected under the doctrine of qualified immunity, a legal shield often used to protect law enforcement from lawsuits. "The courts won't even let me fight for my husband's name," Laura cried in frustration. This echoed cases like Taylor's and George Floyd's, where the families were denied immediate legal recourse. Legal experts began questioning the widespread use of no-knock warrants. "These raids often target the wrong people with deadly consequences," one legal scholar commented. Yet, despite growing public outcry, federal courts refused to allow the Reynolds family to sue. Chapter 5. The Shadowy Connection. Laura turned her attention away from the courts and began her own investigation. What she found was startling. The tip that led to the raid had come from a known criminal informant connected to a local gang with ties to federal agencies. Like the many instances of the FBI working with confidential informants in criminal enterprises, Laura uncovered evidence that suggested the gang was being used as a front by federal agencies to carry out operations. "This wasn't about justice," Laura said. "This was about control." Chapter 6. The unseen hand threats started coming in. "Drop this or you'll regret it," read an anonymous message. Laura realized that her husband's death was part of something much larger. "These people aren't just thugs," a former intelligence officer told her. "They're protected. Some of these gangs are doing the dirty work of federal agencies." Laura's fight for justice wasn't just about her family anymore. It was about exposing the rot that ran deep within the system. Like many who had spoken out before her, she began to fear for her life. Chapter 7. The Gang's Role. The gang that had targeted the Reynolds family wasn't just a street-level organization. Through her investigation, Laura found that they were part of a larger network, cooperating with local law enforcement and even intelligence agencies. Similar to how whistleblowers like Edward Snowden exposed how federal agencies collaborate with private contractors, Laura unearthed records showing the gang had ties to covert federal operations. "They're using these criminals to do what they can't do publicly," she confided to her lawyer. "It's terrifying." Chapter 8. Betrayal. As Laura's investigation gained traction, she learned that some of the very people she trusted had been compromised. Neighbors she had known for years, a local police officer who had once helped her, and even her lawyer were in league with the federal operatives. "This is bigger than just one botched raid," Laura said. "This is systemic." Like the famous quote from George Orwell's 1984, "The further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it." Laura realized she had become a target. Chapter 9. The Hunt Begins. With no one left to trust, Laura and her children went into hiding. Every step she took was monitored. Just as Julian Assange once fled for his life, Laura was now in a game of cat and mouse, running from forces she couldn't see but knew were closing in. "I know they're watching me," she told her few remaining friends. The stress was overwhelming, and Laura felt like a cornered animal. Chapter 10. A Battle for Survival. Desperate to turn the tide, Laura set a trap. She arranged a meeting with one of the gang's leaders, hoping to record their conversation and expose the connection to the federal agencies. But the plan went wrong. Her meeting was ambushed, and her last remaining ally was killed in the shootout. Chapter 11. Justice Denied. The courts and media blamed Laura for the escalating violence. "She should have left well enough alone," said one pundit. Despite mounting evidence of federal corruption, Laura's claims were dismissed as conspiracy theories. "You can't fight a system this big and win," said a former federal prosecutor. "They'll crush you, like they've done to whistleblowers and activists before." Chapter 12. The Final Showdown. In the final dramatic confrontation, the gang found Laura. They raided her last safe house, intent on ending her investigation for good. In a desperate struggle, Laura managed to defend herself, but not without loss. The gang members revealed before dying that they had been paid by the CIA to clean up loose ends. Chapter 13. A Tragic Resolution. With most of her family dead and nowhere left to turn, Laura released the information she had gathered to the press. But like many stories of government malfeasance, it was quickly buried. A few fringe outlets picked it up, but the mainstream media and courts ignored her. "The truth is out there," Laura whispered to herself, echoing the famous line from the X-Files. But she knew the real fight was over. The final chapter ends with Laura disappearing into the shadows, knowing she would always be hunted.